I think everybody has peaks and valleys, and the most motivated person on earth is going to have those. And I would ask them why. Because it's not really the Ferrari. There's a systemic issue that the Ferrari gives you. And you have to figure out what that is. So if you're that person that's, quote, grinding every day and you've built up this macho thing in your head that every day is this grind, but you're not taking care of yourself physically, eventually your mind, body, and spirit begins to give out.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, and welcome to today's episode. On today's show, we have Mark Tewart, who is an in-demand professional speaker, consultant, business turnaround expert, and he is the author of the best-selling book, How to Be a Sales Superstar. And on today's show, we're talking about motivation. We get really deep with Mark today. I really enjoyed this episode, and I got a lot out of it myself. And I love doing these particular episodes, more so even than the latest sales skill or using LinkedIn or prospecting or cold emailing tactics and techniques, because the area of motivation is something that we can all work on no matter how successful we are or aren't. And it affects not just our business life, it affects our personal life, it affects our ability to do the things and to get the things that we want, and to essentially, and this is a deep way of looking at it, but minimize regrets. Because of course, the worst thing that can happen at the end of your days is for you to turn around and say, I wish I would have done this, and it's not because I couldn't have, it is because I wasn't motivated enough to make the effort to achieve those things. So, heavy intro there. You can find out more about Mark over at Tewart.com. You can find out everything that we're talking about over in the show notes of the newly revamped Salesman.red website over at Salesman.red. Check it out. Let me know your thoughts. It's more podcast focused. It's more visual. It's more big. It's bolder. I spent all day working on it, and hopefully you appreciate it, and hopefully it makes a difference. And with that all said, let's jump into today's episode. Hey, Mark, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
You're more than welcome, sir. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics today, the art and discipline behind being motivated. And just to paint a bit of a picture for yourself, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening who are going to be nodding their heads as they're listening to this in the car or at the gym. I am generally optimistic, I'm generally motivated, but I find when I've got really mundane tasks to do, so whether on the sales side of things on the podcast, whether I'm prospecting for the ad sales, that kind of thing tends to get left behind. And if I'm slightly tired, I'll make an excuse and not do it. Whereas the closing of all that, I absolutely love and I jump into and I really embrace it. And then same with the editing of the podcast. There'll be some parts of the editing process which I'll procrastinate on, and others, for example, getting the actual show together and doing all the arty stuff, clipping everything and making the smaller segments. I really enjoy doing that. So that gets done without any hustle from my perspective. So where I want to start with the conversation, Mark, is even super highly successful, motivated people and successful people like yourself, do you have these peaks and troughs of motivation? Or when you've got it nailed, are you just motivated constantly and you wake up and you want to just do everything?
I think everybody has peaks and valleys, and the most motivated person on earth is going to have those. And I think people look at others and think, boy, that person's just got more than me. They're more motivated than me. And I'm not sure that's true. So I think no matter who it is, it's a bit of a game. And what I would invite you to do is to take the thing that you dislike doing the most, like you had mentioned, prospecting. And, you have to fight your way through something. And then once you fight your way through it, what happens is you no longer have to fight it. The more you do it, the better you get at it. The better you get at it, the less that you'll hesitate. When you're good at something, you'll want to do more of it. So if you do it first thing, whatever it is that you don't like doing, if it's prospecting, even if it's administrative, if it's making sales calls, whatever it is, take that, do that first in the morning. And after a period of time, you're going to find that you get so good at it that you will probably have to put something else in the beginning, because you'll no longer be putting it off, so to speak, because you will have built your chops. You will have gotten better at it and won't be regretting it. And you'll have to move on to something else. You will have, I don't want to say conquered it, but you will have definitely put it in a different light for yourself. And
I wanted to talk about perhaps routine and the order of these kind of things, because and again, tell me if I'm totally a random occurrence with this, Mark, but I find when I wake up first thing in the morning, perhaps I'm not a morning person, I don't know, I have to spend probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes motivating myself and getting my arse in gear before I do anything. So that usually involves, I've got a gratitude book, which we've talked about on the show before, and I write a few things that I'm grateful for. That kind of gets me out of that I want a Ferrari, that I want this, that it gets me out of that kind of world and back into reality slightly, perhaps. Then I spend a bit of time in my journal, and there's always something. I generally wake up with something on my mind. I've got to get rid of that. And only after I've done that, had a coffee and a bit of breakfast, can I sit down and actually achieve anything. So even if I've got a crazy day, I still have to go through this routine. Is this, not that this is some kind of therapy session, but Mark, is this normal? Does everyone have to ramp up in the mornings, or is there a way around this? For example, as you said then, of just diving in with the most complex or most painful job that you've got to do?
Well, I think we're on the same track. When I say dive in first thing, a lot of times you're doing your prep work first for yourself to get your mind, your body, your emotions, everything ready, whether that's exercising or like what you talked about, trying to get yourself motivated in a way. Personally, I have a cup by my bed, and it's called Dreams. And in that cup, I have 3x5 cards where I've written out in present tense what my goals are. So I read those to myself, and even aloud when I wake up in the morning and before I go to bed, because that's the last thing that I do before I go to bed, and that's the first thing I do when I wake up. So I'm programming my subconscious on where I want to go, and the subconscious is a goal-seeking missile. Well, when you dive into your day after that, then you're going to find that you have a little bit more zeal, a little bit more purpose. You know, two or three things that I do in the morning, those goals, number one. I also like to read and write. I find that if I read, it motivates me and it gets me learning. And the more that I learn, the more I get excited. So you're right. Like you were talking about trying to get you moving in the right direction. For me, that's reading and that's writing. Now, another thing that I will do, and it depends on my schedule, but if you're trying to be disciplined about something, is exercise. There was a period of time, my son drives to school now, but when I used to take him to school, if I was not on the road traveling, I would immediately take him to school and from there go to the gym and work out. And that was amazing for me because I not only got that out of the way, but I actually enjoy that. And when you're accomplishing something that big in the morning and you're physically invigorating yourself, it all comes back to mind, body, spirit. What are you doing every day that will put you to a higher level, mind, body, spirit? And let's face it, you will have days that you're better than others in all those categories, mind, body, and spirit. So you have to just get to the highest level that you can get at that day. As a matter of fact, I think sometimes your biggest wins are really on the days when you didn't feel like you were winning as much because maybe you were tired or physically, mentally, emotionally just wasn't there. But when you can grind through that and get to your highest level on that day, I think that's the key that builds you. And I'll take it a little further than that, though. I often hear people talking about, I just use the word grinding. And there's sometimes we all
I just literally scribbled down the word grind because I want to come on to that as well.
But I hear it talked about all the time. And I think what it's become is this macho thing that every day is the grind. Every day is this and every day is that, about, grinding and forcing. And if that's where you're at every day, in my opinion, you're doing something wrong, because it shouldn't be a grind every day. There's a grind sometimes, but if you're grinding, it's your mindset. It's the way that you're doing it. It's a success. And you also mentioned about setting yourself up for being successful before you get started in your day. One of the things I think is really important is break your day down into smaller things. I can remember when I first started my business, I would have a goal to make 100 phone calls every single day. Well, it wasn't just 100 phone calls. It was a game, a mental game. How many can I make by 10 o'clock? How many can I make by noon? And even if there was a small reward of me getting to be out in the sunshine and walk around the block or go do something at noon, that was my game because I'm competitive. So I wanted to be able to reach that level of competition, to reach that goal by 10, by 12, by chunking it. And the next thing you know, you've spent 6, 8, 10 hours, whatever you spend in your day, and you've accomplished a lot more than what you ever dreamed if you just break it down into smaller chunks.
So there's loads to got here, Mark. What wanted to get into the show, and you've done it already, is dispel this myth that the super successful people wake up, have a banana, sit in front of their laptop for 12 hours, close a load of deals, and then drive home in the Porsche, and then do the same thing again, have no life. Just things like exercise obviously comes into it. And do you see a link here? I don't know if there's any research that's been done on this, but the stereotype of a super successful male, for example, is someone that's in shape, they exercise, they're doing perhaps long distance running, or something that's mentally tough. Is there a link between those kind of traits and the reality of being in shape or doing events of that nature and people who are successful?
Not always, but I believe so. I think more often than not, because in the mind, body, and spirit, one plays upon itself. So if you're that person that's, quote, grinding every day, and you've built up this this macho thing in your head that every day is this grind, but you're not taking care of yourself physically, eventually your mind, body, and spirit begins to give out. You only have so much to give, and they all interplay. And I've always ate pretty good, taking care of myself, but back in 2005, very unexpectedly, I had a rare form of cancer. And the chances of me getting that type of cancer were less than 1%, but yet I developed that cancer. And so that even makes you more aware that you only have so much time on this earth, and success can be defined in any way that you want to define it. And so I think you have to, first of all, define what you want for success and kind of work backwards. And part of that is your lifestyle. And if you think about it, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. You could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health, you have nothing. You can't be good for yourself. You can't be good for your family. You can't be good for your business. Now, I can tell you that I have at times in my life giving up healthy habits to press through and grind and go further than what I should have in my work habits. And I think most successful people do that. I just think to be successful continually, you have to know when your limits and when you're going past where you should.
And when you said you went past where you should, was it worth it in hindsight?
If it's for small chunks,
no,
I
you
would
personally.
say yes. I would say yes in small chunks. You always have to pay a price. Success is really simple. You have to decide what it is that you want and be super clear about it. Number two, you have to be extremely brutally honest about the price you have to pay. Most people way underestimate the price that has to be paid. And then three, you have to be honest with yourself. Am I willing to pay that price? And sometimes, at least in the beginning, you're going to have to pay a price that's probably going to be physically, mentally, and every other way exhausting. But you have to realize once you get to a certain point, am I just doing this because I'm addicted to it? What am I fulfilling in my needs that tells me I have to do that? That's why I always wonder when these people talk about grind. I look at them and I go, okay, if you're grinding 20 years, and I'm not talking about work, putting in the work, I'm talking about you're saying that you have to grind every day. To me, maybe you haven't really defined what true success is for you, and you're living up to other people's images of success and want to perpetuate it because you think that makes you look successful in other people's eyes.
Let's stop on that point, because this is something I think is incredibly valuable, especially to our millennial audience and anyone who's listening who's perhaps younger than that as well. And it's something I've been through when I worked in medical device sales, of living up to other people's standards. For me, for example, there was always one or two people in the sales team. I was always in the top 10%, perhaps not in the top 2 or 3 spot on the leaderboard. But they would obviously be earning more. They'd perhaps be a bit older. They'd always have that slightly nicer car, nicer clothes, whatever it is. And so I was always aspiring to get to their kind of level. And I found that, and other people come on the show, and Peter Sage is someone in particular who described it like this for me, in that it's just a hamster wheel when you look at life like that, that you're constantly chasing something that is just getting further and further away. Because of course, then you want a yacht, then you've got the smallest yacht, and you can never beat that game, especially in just starting from nothing, or whether you're starting a business or whether you're in sales or whatever it is. So putting all that in perspective, and again, especially perhaps for some of the younger viewers who have less responsibilities and are dreaming of having the Ferraris and the big houses and the Porsches, and this is a massive question to just throw at you mid-interview, Mark, but how do we know what we really want to set that initial goal? How do we define that? Is there a process?
Yes, I think you have to define what are your core needs. And for me, achievement, I identified was a core need of mine. And we can go psychologically and be Freudian and go back to my childhood, I guess, for all of us, and try to figure that out. But one was achievement. Another one is freedom. And so if those are two of my bigger needs, what I have to do is to work into my game plan for my life. When I say life, work and personal, you don't have a difference between the two. They come together. So you have a life, and you can borrow from one for the other. But if you're continually doing that, you're going to hurt yourself. So I just look at first identifying what are your core needs. And then every day making sure that you get your needs met, like you're sprinkling a lawn.
And what would you say, Mark, just to interrupt there, if so you're going through this process of someone, you're perhaps coaching them, and this is a leading question, of course, but what would you say if they said, well, my need is to have a Ferrari?
And I would ask them why. Because it's not really the Ferrari. There's a systemic issue that the Ferrari gives you. And you have to figure out what that is. Because if you don't figure out what that is, what you're going to do your entire life is try to work towards outward issues and outward things to achieve. And the reality is all success is inward, outward. So if you can figure out what your core needs are and you get them met every single day, you can now begin to live your life off of what you want. And when you're constantly moving toward needs every day, it's exhausting and you become needy. And needy people rarely get what they want. So you'll see people that'll become wealthy, broke, wealthy, broke, wealthy, broke, because they're always going for a particular need, but not really truly getting their needs met. And they're trying to satisfy their life with the outside in. It's always an inside out. Figure out what your needs are, get them met, and realize that all the external things are nothing more than a manifestation of trying to meet your needs. And if you can work on the inside out, you'll be more successful for a longer period of time and enjoy your success. After a while, I think those people find out that they get the Ferrari. Hey, and there's nothing wrong with having a Ferrari. I'm not one to tell you that you can't have or go for whatever it is you want. But if you're continually seeking something on the outside externally to make you happy, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to be fulfilled. There won't be a big enough car, a fast enough car, a big enough house, and your true success is not, in my opinion, really success.
And do these needs change over time, I guess, as you have kids or you get in more serious relationships, or are they, and again, we could probably get into the Freudian side of all this, but are they static from birth? Are they really that deeply entrenched?
Oh no, it changes, it manifests, if you will. I'm 54 years old, so my needs were different when I was in my 20s. And when you get married and you have kids, for me personally, I can't speak for others, but that does dramatically change you in some ways. And then just age and perspective, your life experience, all those. That's why I say that nobody can tell you what your definition of success is. Don't buy into all the hype that people tell you. You got to pick it out. Now, am I telling you to settle in your life? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying figure out what your core values are, what your needs, what your wants are, and work backwards from that. Satisfy what your definition is. It doesn't matter what somebody else's definition is. They don't live your life. The worst thing you could do, I think, is, come towards the end of your life and realize that you've spent a life just by somebody else's definition rather than for yourself.
Amazing. And I want to put this into context and perspective for the audience as well. I'm intrigued to the answer for this question, Mark, of say that we sorted or we think we know our needs. I'm guessing you don't really know that until you've achieved them, and then you can guess, you can then change them up, or you're comfortable or whatever it is. But how far should we be projecting into the future while we're making these goals and while we are making plans for ourselves? Because I can very comfortably focus for a month if I want to close the ad sales for Q3. I can say, well, I'm going to have a month. Every morning I'm going to do so many prospecting calls. I'm going to close so many deals, and my brain can comprehend this. It soaks it in and absorbs it. Then when I look a year into the future of perhaps where I want the podcast to be, how many downloads, or the people, the clients that I want to be having coming on board as ad partners, that kind of thing, things start to get a bit more fuzzy, and I can say, well, that'd be nice, but I find it difficult to cement that in my mind. So is there a certain period of time that you should be planning towards? And is a month enough? Is a year enough? Should we be looking 10 years into the future, perhaps?
I think you have to do both. I think it's better for you if you do both. If you have short term, it's more concrete because it's tangible to you. But you'll find that some of the longer term things that you're looking for tend to pull out your character, your values. So they're more value based than they are just like you're talking about, how many customers you can have, or even just how much money. So I really invite you to do both short and long term. I think it's healthy, but you will find as you go along that some of those long-term things, because of experience, you'll get guided in a different direction, and you'll realize that the goal that you were going for is no longer your goal, and you will have moved towards something else or something you value more. And so there's nothing wrong with that. We're all a work in process. Things change, and I've achieved goals, and the moment I achieve the goal, I've then realized that goal wasn't what I thought. And that led me in another direction, that it was somewhat empty in a way. There wasn't enough behind the goal.
And what are your thoughts on the Grant Cardone's clearly popularized it, but this idea of 10xing your goals and a really clear example for me was I wanted to get 10,000 downloads an episode within the first year or so of the show. We've smashed that already. We're already achieving that. And, clearly we're not even halfway through the year. And looking back, if I would have said, well, I wanted 100,000 downloads per episode, perhaps I would have made different moves. I would have took more risk. I don't know. Hindsight's a very easy thing to look back and procrastinate over, I guess. But should your goals be realistic, or should they be unrealistic, or should you just be pushing yourself that little bit further than perhaps how you can visualize yourself at the moment?
There's an age-old acronym that I do not believe in, and it's called SMART. And part of it was the R for realistic. Who is to say what's realistic? So I don't believe in that acronym. It's been taught and passed around forever. But the moment I ever first saw that acronym, I thought, I don't agree with that at all. So the reality is, I think that you have to set bigger goals than even what you think you can do, because it does push your mindset. There's an old saying that your life is based upon your questions. Your success is based upon the quality of your questions, and your life is based upon the quality of your questions. Ask bigger and better questions, have bigger and better goals, and you'll probably have a bigger and better life. Because you're right, you may not achieve that, but you will push past comfort zones. And the other reason why I think you have to have bigger goals is simply this. We all, everybody, I don't care if you're a billionaire. I don't care if you own 14 companies. I don't care if you're an Olympic athlete. Everybody in some way, shape, or form limits themselves to less than what they're capable of, for sure. The mind can expand to wherever you want it to go and lead you in that direction. So I believe we all put certain limitations and barriers to ourselves that just don't have to be there.
Put this into context for us, Mark. What's a barrier or limitation that you have put in front of yourself, whether recently or in the past?
I would say more in relation to choices of that constant struggle that other people may go through with kids, travel, being home, working, being home. I think all of us face that little conundrum. And there are other things that you could do. I mean, why does that have to be the question? If your mind is thinking, you can make as much or more money at your house than you can travel or doing other things. So I think sometimes, once again, we ask the wrong questions and we begin to limit ourselves.
And is it the wrong question, Mark? Sorry to jump in there. Is it the wrong question, or is it that it's just a superficial question? And as you said before, we need to ask why, and then why, and then why. And then for me, I usually have to ask why about 15 more times before I get to anything that actually means anything.
There's an old saying, when the why gets strong, the how gets easy. So whatever goal you ever set or whatever you have, keep asking why. I'll hear people all the time say, well, I want to make X amount of money. I say, why? They can't tell me. They cannot tell me other than, well, I'll just have more money. I can spend more money. I can do, but why? And they can't get to the systemic issue. And I tell them, I say, until you figure that out, I promise you, you will never make that money, because you truly don't know. It's a false marker that you've allowed somebody, society, what they think you should be doing, what you think would make you successful, but you really don't have that definition concrete in your mind of why. So I don't see it happening. You better do your work on you. Once you figure it out, then you tend to achieve more of your goals.
And I'm going to wrap up this part of the episode with this, Mark, in that perhaps not as directly as what we're talking about here. And of course, you can't just keep asking why with a prospect or a customer. But are these some of these questions things that we should be asking our prospects to help define what their goals are, so that we can help them better on a deeper, less superficial level than we're going to improve your revenue by XYZ, which is where the initial part of most sales conversations start?
100%. I have a little saying in sales: dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper. Obviously, if you ask more and better questions and you dig deeper into finding out the why, and to give you an idea, when people talk, customers are talking to you, if you're a salesperson, there's three things that you have to listen for: what they're saying, what they're trying to say, and what they really mean. What they say are the words and the content. What they're trying to say is something different. It's deeper. And what they really mean is a deeper thing altogether. Example, if they say, hey, I just want to think it over. What they're saying is, I want to think it over. What they're trying to say is, I have fear. And what they really mean is, I have to get more information or shop you, your product, service, what your value is, to see if this is right for me. I'm not yet convinced. Well, if you take that and apply it to just about anything, including ourselves or our customers, it's just digging a little bit deeper for what the actual leverage point is, what that motivation. Forget that you're selling a product or a service. You're not. It goes back to you're selling, you're helping people find a solution to a problem that you're probably going to help them feel emotionally and solve logically. And that's really what you're doing. Excuse me, the sirens are going. The cops must be coming to get me.
Yeah, you're not just about to have your door kicked in, are you? It would make a fantastic video extra clip, I'm sure.
It'll be a top-rated show.
Yeah. And with that, Mark, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. The first one: what is one book or resource other than your own, which we'll come on to, that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
Well, I think I recommended this to you the last time I talked to you, but I always recommend to everybody Psycho-Cybernetics
Yeah.
by Maxwell Maltz to try to understand your subconscious. I think that's a phenomenal book. And then the second one would be through John Capel's Tested Advertising Methods. And the reason why, I think salespeople make a mistake that they think they're only in sales. If you're in sales, trust me, you're in marketing. And if you're in marketing, you're in sales. They both go hand in hand. And when salespeople only focus on sales without marketing, they are forever limited and growing their business exponentially. And the same would be of advertisers and marketers that think they're in marketing, but they don't have to, quote, sell through the marketing and advertising. So it's an oldie but a goodie. That is Tested Advertising Methods by John Caples.
Amazing stuff. Okay, next one. And I want you to go deeper than just, I like helping my clients, customers, or I like seeing them grow those businesses or anything like that. Mark, what motivates you personally to close more deals?
Winning. I like competition, and closing is competition and winning. Money is a marker that you gauge it by, but it's the best thing other than, say, athletics, that you can have that competition. So I'm a competitive person, and I still feel the same way today closing a deal as I did, say, 20 years ago. It's competition for me. Can I win?
Amazing stuff. Thank you for that candid answer. I appreciate that. And final question, I'd be interested to see if you give the same answer that you gave last time you were on the show. But if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Well, it could be different because I don't remember what I told you, but I do know there'd probably be several pieces of advice, so they would all play. And that is just think big, think big, think big, think big. I don't take my son to school every day anymore. He drives, but every day that I took him to school, I said the same thing every day that he got out of the car. Think big, live large, and you're in charge. Think big, live large, and you're in charge. Live large. That doesn't mean you have to drive the biggest or the fastest car, have the biggest house. It means live to your fullest capacity. So think big, bigger than what you normally would. Think big, live large, and then you're in charge. You're always responsible. Don't ever be a victim. You are responsible for everything. Put yourself in a position of being responsible that you never blame, and you will be a lot happier and more successful, and you will recover and be more resilient when you have your downs, because everybody has their downs, but you'll be a lot more resilient. And I posted something yesterday that I had a lot of comments about, and that was to be brilliant, you have to be resilient.
And that's really empowering. It's really interesting for me to hear that from you, Mark. And I think all of us could say those three sentences to ourselves and probably get something from it. To flip that on its head, just to wrap up the show on this point, how much damage, and I'm not a parent, so I can't criticize anyone else's parenting either, because I've no idea. And I hope they won't for a few years yet. But how much damage does the alternative of what most parents say when the son daughters get out of the car of, go on, have a great day, be safe. How much damage does that do to people on a deeper psychological level, perhaps in their careers and just in their life?
I hate to be judgmental of parents, but if I were to, excuse me, if I were to say that there is a significant limiting belief that is created in a child, it comes from people that mean the most well for them, and that is generally parents, teachers, preachers. And I know this will be very controversial, but if you look at often what parents, teachers, and preachers teach, it's about safety, it's about limitation, and it puts into the subconscious mind that this is the way you live your life. And when I say damaging, I think it is very damaging. And it's well-intentioned, but unfortunately it has very unintended consequences that limits people and makes them unhappy potentially for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, the reason I ask about that, again, I've not got kids, I've not read any books on parenting or anything like that. None of my mates that I spend a lot of time with have kids over the age of 2 or 3, so I've got no experience or any of this. But as you were saying what you were saying, it just resonated with me because I've just got this really vivid image of my mum. Every time I'd leave the house or do whatever, she'd be like, she wouldn't say, be careful. I don't know what she'd say, just go and have fun or whatever. But my dad would always say the same thing, and then his last final breath as I'm running out the door of my skateboard or my mountain bike, probably 20 minutes away from hurting myself every single time because I'm so tall and skinny that every time I fall off, I'd get injured. He would always say under his breath, kind of like, "Oh, just be careful," like in that kind of tone, and it just really resonated with me as you were saying that. And yeah, I think it was an important point to just stop on, perhaps. And
can I share a quick story with you?
Of course you can.
I was out of town working one time, and my son was little, and my ex-wife was with my son at the pool at the YMCA, and they have a large board. I think it's a 10 or 12-foot diving board. And he was young enough that would have been, probably scary, extremely scary. Well, he got up there, and, I guess my ex-wife first reaction would have been to say, "Oh no." But then she's hearing me in her head saying, "I can't do that." Well, the other parents are coming around like, in frantic. "Oh, you got to stop Jake. You can't let him do that. That's not safe." And she said, "No, I don't think that's what Mark would want, but I'm hearing him in my head. I don't think he's going to die jumping off this 10-foot board into a swimming pool, so he has to experience it." Well, I guess when he went off, he tremendous smacked. I'm sure it had to be painful just hearing about it. But what he did was he got right out of that pool, climbed right back up on that board, and went off again. And that's what kids without limitations will do. It's only what we do to them often that begins to limit their ability to risk, their ability to seek, their ability to dream. And they've had studies that show that often in school, the further they go in school, the less self-esteem that they have grade by grade by grade to the time that they graduate. That's such a huge amount of the kids have a very low self-esteem. And I think that we're guilty as adults of creating that lack of self-esteem. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with you flopping and hurting yourself every once in a while. And so to me, that was a great analogy for me that also reminded me about the power of kids, how powerful they can be unless we limit them.
Amazing, Mark. And on that note, I want you to tell us a little bit about the book and then your website so we can find out more about you.
Sure. Go to my website at Tewart.com. That's TEWART.com. And it's just like Stewart, but no S. And my book that you can find there or on Amazon as well is How to Be a Sales Superstar, Break All the Rules, and Succeed While Doing It.
Amazing. Well, with that, Mark, I want to thank you for both your insights, which I knew were going to be brilliant, and I want to thank you for being candid and open and sharing some personal stories with us today. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
And there we have it. Thank you, Mark, for coming back on the show. It is not very often, and this is a testament to Mark, that I have people come on multiple times. And that's how much I get out of being in Mark's company and chatting with him. So I appreciate your time, Mark. I want to thank you, Sales Nation, as always, for tuning in. Massively appreciate it. Make sure you check out the new look salesman.red website. And with that all said, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.